coming so bright and early to this great venue. It's a really exciting place, actually. And thank you to Wealth at Work for organising this amazingly timed seminar. Now, what I plan to talk to you this morning about is going through a little bit of history, what the traditional retirement income options look like, emphasising even more than before the need for information, education and advice. A brief word about the budget measures and the end of mass market annuitisation automatically, and the budget game changer, what it means for the future. So let's start with the traditional UK pension situation for members coming up to retirement. Essentially, we've typically had a one-size-fits-all approach to pensions and retirement. For most people, that's where the UK has been. Either you had a DB pension, or you were in a DC scheme, which pretty much automatically bought you an annuity at retirement, perhaps income drawdown if you had enough in your fund. But most members never had to choose what to do when they were coming up for retirement, whether they were in a DB or a DC scheme. So they never engaged with their retirement income options properly. In other countries, it's not like that. In other countries, people do have to make choices and decisions, and they're not just guided to one automatic path. So when people reach pension age here, now that they're fitter and healthier and not old at the age of 60 or 65 anymore, the scheme pension age itself may not mean that they're going to retire. Working longer is much more common. More than 1 million people are still working past pension age, which means people are going to have to think ahead rather than the traditional ostrich approach. If you don't think you've got enough in your pension, you don't want to worry about it, let's just get on with life. Now, I hope there will be a greater understanding of the need for everybody to have their own individual financial plan. Don't ignore it, it's not going to be worked out for you. And it's not easy, which means most people will need help. The decisions are complex, and employers and trustees, in my view, have an enormously important role to play in providing information or education and possibly advice. With auto-enrollment and all employers having to have a pension scheme, the facility alongside it to offer education, advice, information is an obvious one if you want to get economies of scale and try and deliver what people need in some kind of cost-effective manner. And I don't think people can actually do this right for themselves, especially as we're going to have so much more flexibility and choice. The ideal is for people to have independent advice to help them understand the options. As we move on from annuities and drawdown being the only options, making a financial plan and crucially monitoring it over time is something that people will need help with. But currently we have a very confused system, and most people, I don't think, really understand what advice is. We've got this thing called guidance, and the Chancellor made this mistake in his budget last week. Announcing the changes, he said everybody will be entitled to 30 minutes of face-to-face advice. When you looked at the budget small print, it actually is just guidance. Now, if the Chancellor himself confuses those words, what hope does the individual have to understand the nuances of our system, which has very different regulatory protections for lots of very different things that are all actually called advice, but which are, in most people's idea, true advice. And most people end up with guidance, which means the individual is given some information but is left to make their own mistakes. So guidance can guide people, but what if they actually don't understand the guidebook? They can help people ask the right questions, but they won't ensure that people get the right answers. This is crucial, this is fundamental, and this has to be part of the brave new world going forward. We have got to take this seriously to help people understand and make the changes work. If you get full advice, an IFA style, independent, non-product sale type of advice, then the advisor helps and takes responsibility for helping you make the right choice. It's not just caveat emptor. And you're covered with regulatory protection if the decision was wrong. And advice, therefore, is the way to ensure people can really deal with and get the best outcome in this new world of even more complex options. And in future, there are bound to be many more income options to choose from. Not just the historic push down one path that we could rely on for many people. Tax-free cash and annuity, tax-free cash and drawdown, or a DB pension. The budget opens the way for so much more choice. I hope that we will get the industry developing pension income funds that will be the follow-on from the accumulation phase of pension growth funds and can manage a transition, maybe with partial retirement. As income drawdown becomes completely flexible, people will need help making sensible investment choices, but equally the industry is likely to come up with a range of options, just like we are doing already for the growth phase, the accumulation phase. Hopefully different types of annuities, perhaps delaying the annuity decision until much later. I still believe there will be a role for annuities. It may be for part of the fund, not all the fund, and I think part of the problem of the past environment is that people were just led to put all their pension savings in one product. Just buy an annuity, a standard annuity as well. I mean, not even necessarily an enhanced or an impaired life one. Guaranteed products, investment-linked annuities. And then, of course, your retirement income can come from other places too, whether it's ISAs, other savings, inheritance, property, equity release. All of these can now be considered, and will now be considered alongside annuities, because annuities will suit some, but not all. They give you a secure income, but people are concerned that their capital may be at risk. There is a need to bear in mind people's wishes for a legacy. That's one of the reasons annuities have been so unpopular. The standard single life level annuity, which more than half the market ended up buying, because they didn't really understand what on earth was going on, and that was the one they were offered, and they were told to look for the best rate, and that offers the highest starting rate, unless you get an impaired life or enhanced annuity, which would have offered you a better rate, but your provider may never have helped you understand that. But even then, that annuity only addresses one retirement risk. And I think that's something the regulator belatedly became as concerned about as many of us have been already. effectively, a standard annuity insures you against the risk of living an awfully long time. That's considered a risk in actuarial speak. It's pretty good news for most of us. But it doesn't offer you any protection against inflation. It doesn't cover you if you die young and your partner needs to benefit from your pension savings. It also doesn't help with this legacy desire if you die relatively young, because you lose all your fund goes to the insurer. And if your health or other circumstances changed, even if you had bought an annuity that was based on your health at the time, it could have worsened. There was no flexibility in the product to cope with that. And of course, there's nothing that will help you if investment returns are good or if rates rise again. Once you've locked in, you've locked in. And there's nothing left for care if you bought an annuity and 5 years later you need to spend money on care. You can only take the annual income. So I kind of think of it like forcing everybody to buy an insurance policy at retirement that covers you only against one risk. As if you buy a house and you are told you only need to insure it against fire. Well, if your house burns down, you'll be quite pleased you had that insurance and it will cover you. But what if you are burgled? What if you have a flood? You'd actually need insurance against that. And the standard annuity didn't help. And no risk warnings were given. No suitability checks. I mean, all of these things look obvious when you look back. But this was just the standard part of the market. The new guidance or advice will need to help people understand these risks. And I think the FCA has now worked out, belatedly, that it has failed to regulate this industry properly in the past. You had an inflexible, complicated set of products where the same product, exactly the same product, could be sold to somebody at 20 or 30% more cost for exactly the same thing. And once it was bought, you could never change it, which is unique. You know, if you buy the wrong house, you can change it. If you marry the wrong spouse, you can change it. But if you had the wrong annuity, you'll start. And the open market option really isn't sufficient because it led people to believe you just need to find a better rate. But you need to know what the product you want is first, what the product is. And you also need to know what the right timing is. Many people were buying annuity because they thought you had to at scheme pension age, but you don't. If you're still working and you don't need the income, you didn't have to. They wouldn't know that. If they got guidance which sent them to an annuity broker, as many pension schemes trustees did at retirement, thinking they were doing the right thing, well, the annuity brokers would just say, well, hang on a minute, you don't actually need to buy that now, because that's what they were there to do, consent. Or that you might be able to take a trivial commutation. Not all claimants would have checked that for you. And there was no cap on the fees that could be charged. The RDR made it worse for people trying to give independent advice, because they had to declare an upfront fee. You went to a non-advised service, they could hide the commission, they could call it a free service and then only tell you about the charge right at the point of sale. But most importantly, the Treasury recognised in the budget that the value for money from annuities after QE and after the dramatic drop in long-term interest rates had fallen so far that many providers were simply not offering fair value. I did this table a while ago, but it was based on the ABI's second annuity window, plus a quote from the Money Advice Service from the Prudential. This is for a single life level annuity at age 65. And I assumed a 3.5% investment return that the insurer might earn on your money. We know that many of them will earn a lot more than that, some may earn less, but we call it that. With the Prudential quote from the Money Advice Service, until you were 102, the Prudential still retained some of your money and earned a 3.5% investment return. With the worst providers, it was around 100. With the best rate from Aviva, you had to live till 89 before the mortality cost subsidy kicked in. And partly that's a function of the dramatic fall in rates. But partly it's a function of captive customers, I suspect. And if the mortality cost subsidy isn't there, what is the point of buying an annuity? Everyone who died before 102, 197, whichever rate you would get on the annuity, depending on which company you were with, by the time they died, the insurer still had some of their money. And of course, we are going to move now to a position where most people will end up in some kind of income drawdown, get tax-free cash and then have the rest of their money. That allows you the flexibility to earn investment returns, wait and see what happens to your health. You might then want to buy an impaired life annuity, but you get a better rate. And it is hopefully going to mean that with more competition, there'll be perhaps a reduction in the costs. The mass market drawdown with the costs of current drawdown is probably going to be a bit problematic. And the costs of ongoing advice, if you keep those stipulations, I think that will make it a very uneconomic proposition for many people with smaller funds. Which is why I think we need the sort of unitised approach, the pooled approach, pension income funds of some kind. And effectively that would be mass market drawdown. Hopefully also some products that might help with care. We need to free up the rules which have strict requirements on the way annuity payouts can come. If you want an annuity, maybe you could have a U-shape with some insurance at the end where the income picks up if you need care in later life. Usually the highest spending is at the beginning of your retirement, and there's a kind of period when you're maybe a little less active, but not terribly ill, until maybe a couple of years before, but you don't know exactly when that's going to start. Before you pass away, you need care. So the regulators have got a challenge, haven't they? They are recognising that they can't leave it to the ABI to self-regulate anymore because it ended up dumbing down to the lowest common denominator. There were and are some insurers who behaved a lot better. My sadness is that they didn't rein in some of the worst practices in the industry. It is going to be important to ensure that advice is going to be independent of product selling and looks more at financial planning to help people understand the decisions and parameters that they need to think about. And I think the pensions regulator will need to be guiding trustees to ensure that they are giving adequate information and to impress upon trustees how important it might be for members to get independent advice and help members know that. Currently, the pensions regulator guidance suggests that the guidance services are just as valuable to members as full advice. Now, some guidance is better than others, but there isn't an industry-approved standard for guidance. Anybody can call themselves an annuity advisor without qualifications. It doesn't mean anything, as long as they make clear we're not offering advice, we're offering guidance. But that can mislead people very badly. So there's a role for the regulator to step up to the plate. And I think there is a real role for employers in this new world. Not as it was in the past, providing generous pensions and so on, but actually facilitating the education and advice specific to workers' age and life stage to help them in an, if you like, group setting, which makes it much more affordable to deliver the advice, and help people understand the benefits of working longer, the implications of working longer, or perhaps cutting back to part-time alongside their pension, perhaps changing career. I mean, there are lots of ways in which the workplace can help people plan their future via advice. So, finally, what does the future look like? Well, we all know these budget measures are an absolute game changer. Suddenly, there's going to be flexibility. We have the most inflexible pension system in the world. There's no other country that has such strict control on what you can do on the way in and what you can do on the way out. That's gone. That's amazing. More choice. We will get new products to give secure pension income, but perhaps allowing upside, or to be able to mix and match pension and work income, different types of investment income, maybe preparing for care. We are actually in serious danger of having a rather coherent pension system. We've got the state pension reforms, which will give a flat rate state pension. So the risks of people falling back on the state, which were driving a lot of this nanny state, push people down the annuity path, have reduced significantly. I mean, of course, if they end up on housing benefit or council tax benefit, there would still be a means test element, but the majority of people with pensions are probably not going to be falling back on housing benefit and council tax benefit. So we leave it to the individual. We've got a flat rate base pension, whatever you want, you need to save for. You're on your own to build up some extra savings. Auto-enrollment then kicks in to help people save with money from their employer. We know the minimum won't be enough to provide a decent income. I'd like to see some kind of perhaps auto-escalation measures coming. Maybe we'll even get that. So many of the things that we've been working on for so long suddenly happened. I think anything's possible right now. You know, any pay rise you get, encourage people to put at least some of it into extra pension contributions. They haven't been living on the money already, so they won't miss it as much as if you suddenly take money away from them. And annuities may, I believe, still be the right product, but for later in life. You know, the kind of annuity market never adjusted to rising life expectancy. Everybody was still locked into this magic one date that you knew decades ahead that you were suddenly going to stop working from, which doesn't happen anymore. Crucial to this is workplace education and advice, which can really help people. I mean, the kind of things that Wealth at Work is doing, that employers are embracing now, are so important. And then we can really make the most of this brave new world that brings Britain's pension system into the 21st century. And you are all part of it, you are all engaged in it. Your members know that something is changing, and we'll be looking to you to help them through. And I think you've got a great opportunity. It's really exciting. Thank you very much for listening.